The day I came home and found strangers carrying furniture into my family house, I honestly thought they had the wrong address. Then I saw my son-in-law, Ryan, standing on the porch with a smile on his face. He waved as if he were doing me a favor and casually said, "My parents are moving in. It'll only make things easier for everyone." He never asked for my permission because he believed he didn't need it. In that moment, I felt my heart sink. If emotional family stories with meaningful life lessons mean something to you, I truly appreciate you subscribing to Behind Dad. And before we continue, I'd like to mention that the pictures you see throughout this video are artistic recreations created to bring this story to life. They are not actual photographs from my family's personal memories. For 38 years, that house had been my safe place. My late wife and I worked overtime, skipped vacations, and sacrificed countless luxuries just to pay off the mortgage. Every room carried a memory of our family growing together. After she passed away, I promised myself I would protect the home we built together. Watching unfamiliar people walk through the front door with boxes felt like someone was slowly erasing her memory. Ryan introduced his parents as though everything had already been decided. His father, Thomas, shook my hand politely while his mother, Linda, admired the living room and talked about where she wanted to place her furniture. They looked uncomfortable, almost as if they believed I had already agreed to everything. My daughter Emily stood quietly beside them. She avoided looking into my eyes, and that silence hurt more than anyone's words. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. Instead, I smiled, welcomed everyone inside, and offered fresh coffee. While they settled into the dining room, I quietly walked to my study and returned with a small sealed envelope. I placed it beside Thomas's coffee cup and simply said, "Before anyone carries another box into this house, I'd appreciate it if you would read this." He opened the envelope, read the first page, and suddenly his expression changed. Without saying a single word, he pushed his chair back to his feet, and within minutes, every mover outside had stopped working. The room became so quiet that I could hear the movers outside closing the truck doors. Thomas continued staring at the paper in his hands while Linda leaned over his shoulder to read it. Her face lost its color almost immediately. Ryan laughed nervously and reached for the envelope, but Thomas folded it shut before he could touch it. Then he slowly stood up and looked directly at his son. "Ryan," he said in a calm but firm voice, "we need to talk. Right now." Ryan looked confused. He insisted there had to be some misunderstanding. He reminded everyone that Emily had told him I would eventually agree because I was living alone in a house that was too big for one person. Hearing those words hurt, but I stayed quiet. I had learned years earlier that the truth speaks much louder when people discover it themselves instead of having it forced on them. Thomas finally handed the paper to Ryan. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a copy of the legal agreement my late wife and I had signed years before. The document clearly stated that the home was protected by a family trust. No one could move in, transfer ownership, or establish residency without my written consent. At the bottom was a handwritten note from my wife that the trustee had preserved with the documents. "This home must always remain a place of love, never pressure." Seeing her words again made my throat tighten. Ryan read the page twice, then a third time. The confidence disappeared from his face. Before he could speak, Thomas quietly apologized to me. He admitted Ryan had told them I had already invited them to move in and wanted the family together. Linda wiped away tears and said she never would have stepped inside if she had known the truth. Outside, the movers were waiting for instructions. Ryan slowly looked toward the front window, realizing every box was still sitting in the truck. Then his phone rang. He answered it without thinking. After only a few seconds, his expression turned pale. The caller wasn't one of the movers. It was someone whose name he clearly hadn't expected to see that day. Ryan slowly lowered the phone from his ear without saying a word. I could see the color drain from his face. Thomas quietly asked who had called. Ryan hesitated before answering. "It's my business partner." His voice was barely above a whisper. He stepped outside to take the call, but through the front window we could all see him pacing nervously across the driveway. Every few seconds he grabbed his head as if the world around him had suddenly fallen apart. A few minutes later, he came back inside looking like a completely different man. The confidence he had walked in with was gone. He admitted that his business partner had discovered several unpaid debts and frozen the company's accounts until everything was investigated. Ryan confessed that he had planned for his parents to move into my house because he expected to lose his own home within weeks. Instead of telling the truth, he convinced himself that forcing his way into mine would solve every problem. Hearing those words filled me with sadness more than anger. Fear had slowly turned into selfishness, and selfishness had nearly destroyed our family. Emily finally broke her silence. Through tears, she admitted she had believed Ryan when he said I had already agreed to the arrangement. She confessed that she noticed the stories changing over the past few weeks, but ignored the warning signs because she wanted to believe her husband. She looked at me and whispered, "Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have asked you myself." Those words hurt, but they also reminded me of the honest little girl who had always run to me whenever she made a mistake. Just then, Thomas placed his hand on Ryan's shoulder. In a calm but firm voice, he said, "Son, we're leaving today. Not because James asked us to, but because a home built on someone else's pain will never become our home." The movers immediately began carrying every box back into the truck. As I watched them through the window, I thought the hardest part was finally over. Then my attorney called with unexpected news. Someone had just attempted to file a change of residence request using my home address, and the signature on the paperwork wasn't mine. When I arrived at my attorney's office the next morning, the paperwork was already waiting on the desk. Someone had submitted documents attempting to establish residency at my address without my knowledge. The request had been rejected because the signatures didn't match the legal records kept by the family trust. My attorney calmly explained that the attempt had been flagged before anything could be approved. I felt relieved, but also deeply saddened that my own family had allowed things to reach this point. Ryan admitted the truth before anyone else could speak. He confessed that he had signed the forms himself, believing that once his parents were officially living in the house, I would eventually give up rather than fight them. He lowered his head and quietly said, "I wasn't trying to steal your memories. I was trying to escape the consequences of my own mistakes." For the first time since all of this began, I saw genuine regret instead of excuses. Emily stepped toward me with tears in her eyes and apologized for choosing silence over trust. I hugged my daughter and reminded her that mistakes can be forgiven, but honesty has to come first. Thomas and Linda apologized once more and promised they would never allow themselves to be used in someone else's plans again. Over the next several months, Ryan worked to repay his debts honestly instead of looking for shortcuts. He and Emily attended counseling together, and little by little, our family began rebuilding the trust that had been broken. Today, when I walk through my front door, I don't think about the day strangers nearly moved into my home. I think about the lesson my late wife left behind. A house is protected by locks and legal papers, but a family is protected by truth. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments because someone reading them may find the courage to choose honesty before it's too late. Share this story with someone who believes family should always be built on respect, not pressure. Thank you for spending this time with me on Behind Dad. Never let fear convince you to take what isn't yours, because the strongest homes are built on trust, and trust can never be forced.